So okay, this is the main, so this is where everything starts. And I created an exporter, and the exporter is the standard output one. So that's why if we don't override the tracer, everything gets printed into the standard output. What I will love to do is to create an exporter that actually use Zap, that is my logger. So the trace will go together with the logs that I get from the application. So the raw JSON is not really is not really great, but there is no exporter yet. There is one in the collector for Zap, but it looks like I can't really use it in the for the Go library. It only works in the collector. So I'm going to see what I can do there. And that's it. So I set the global tracer to the standard output exporter, and I'm configuring a bunch of stuff like the sampler, more dependencies. Yeah, so I created two keys. One is the one that describes how many pods has to be gathered profiled from, and the other one is the same but by Go routine. So as I said, I have more Go routines. So I'm going with that key. I'm going to count how many pods each Go routine is gathering. So in this way, I can figure out if with a workload that is real, so it's not just a single workload, I can figure out if the scheduling works properly. So yeah, I'm overriding if the tracer variable that comes from a flag is set to Jaeger, I override the default exporter, the standard output one, with the Jaeger one. So let's see if there are any. Yeah. Okay. Oops. Okay. So if I get the Jaeger as a parameter, I will override it with the Jaeger exporter. And what is important to remember here is that you have to defer the flash. You have to flash the exporter. So in this way, when the command ends, all the traces that are impending will get flashed. I wasn't doing that, and I was missing the parent span. So remember to do that, otherwise. And that doesn't really work. It's not needed for the standard output one because it just prints everything it gets. But for Jaeger, it does a bit of batching. So you have to actually flash the batch to make it work. So this is how you create a span. If the span is the first one, it doesn't have any, the context doesn't have any other span already there, so it assumes it is the parent. I defer the end, so it will go and end it out. So this is one of the way you do that with the start. With the start one. There is also another way that works with a callback fashion. So you actually have a function inside. I think I use it in another place. Yeah. So this is the other way. So you do tracer with span, and you pass the context. In this case, the context already has a span. So this is going to be child of the one that is in the context. And as you can see, this is the one that describes the Go routines. So all the Go routines gets the span name has Go routine dash the index of the Go routine. So that's why in the trace we see span that calls Go routine 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So everything that is inside this callback, this function, is actually going to be in the same trace. So you don't have to defer it in any way because it's already there is already a defer implicit in when the function ends. So when to use one, when to use another, I'm not really sure. I like to be, I don't know. I think there is a need for both. In the Go routine one, I found myself comfortable with the callback one because it's scoped, it's small, so it's easy to see. For the entire command, it's a long file, so it's easy to know that to avoid a nesting, because if you are in the callback, you go one like nesting, you have one more nesting, and that's not really always useful. So yeah, I had to create, this is the Intel.js library that probably yeah, I didn't try um, the probability sampler yet. I think I'm going to. We are actually using this code in production, so we trace, we gather profiles from a lot of pods. So I would like to try this out without any sample, but I think in a couple of days I'm gonna add the probability one. So I will be sure to let you know. If you follow me on Twitter, you can send me a message. I will get back to you as soon as I can try it. Um, so yeah, I mean, the way I had to revisit a little bit the pprof util profile.go. It's the client that no, this is the piece of code that goes and gets the profile from the pod. So I'm actually, the way it works is it accepts a context, and I'm building a request with the context. So and I'm doing the same I was doing before. So I create a span from the context I get, and yeah, that's it. It's important to inject the context into the request, so the request, you will actually see the request in the span with its own span. I did the same for the ProfF client, because ProfF doesn't really have a client, so I have one implementation for the function, for the API request I use, and as you can see, I do the same. I create a tracer that is called bprof. I get the tracer that is called bprof client, and yeah, I create a span and I do the HTTP request, injecting the actual contents for the span. So I presume if we take